All right. Well, thank you for joining everyone. We just hit the 10 a.m. mark. We are very glad that you were able to make it and to join us today. So we are going to get started. Good morning again, and thank you for joining us. My name is Juliana Baez, and I am Program Coordinator at the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And I would like to welcome you today to our webinar where we'll be discussing sustainability in the work that is being done for survivors in detention. We have a few logistic items to go over before we begin the webinar today. This webinar will be recorded, and we will be sending you a link with the recording and the PowerPoint shortly. The link is just going to be like the ones that I've been sending with the YouTube information, so it makes it easier for everyone. All participants will be muted, but to avoid any unwanted noise, because we do know technology, we do encourage you to mute your own phones if possible, and to mute your computers if you have the access to do so. If you do not want to lose a question during your presentation or during the presentation, please feel free to write those in the chat box. If we don't get to it during the presentation, we'll get to them at the end as well. We also would like to disclose that this webinar was developed as a resource, and it's definitely not the only tool to use. We encourage you to use each other, as a participating members of the California Advancing PREA project to ask questions and be each other's resources as well. And we also would like to disclose that the following information and the narratives of our guests are not necessarily those of CALCASA or JDI, so keep those things in mind as well. Sustaining our services, sustaining ourselves was developed as a resource as we come to the final months of year 4 of the California Advancing PREA project. And this is actually our last webinar of year 4. And we wanted to have a more in-depth conversation of what sustainability may look like from different perspectives. Even though many of the points in this webinar can be applied to all forms of detention, the Advancing PREA project keeps many of its protocols and procedure conversations specific to those of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation Facilities. Again, I'm Juliana Baez, Program Coordinator at CALCASA. My co-presenter is Matthew Van Winkle, Program Officer at Just Detention International, or JDI. And we have several guest speakers joining us today, sharing the narratives on different perspectives of sustainability that have worked for their agencies. So welcome to our guest speakers as well. So let's begin. The California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, or CALCASA, is committed to ending sexual violence through a multifaceted approach of prevention, intervention, education, research, advocacy, and public policy. CALCASA provides leadership, vision, and resources to rape crisis centers, individuals, and other entities committed to ending sexual violence. At CALCASA, we truly envision a world free from sexual violence.
Thank you, Juliana, and welcome, everyone. Just Detention International, or JDI for short, is a health and human rights organization that seeks to end sexual abuse in all forms of detention. It's JDI's belief that when the government takes away someone's freedom, it takes on an absolute responsibility to protect that person's safety, and that no matter what crime someone has committed, rape is not part of the penalty. So we're speaking to you now because of the California Advancing PREA project, which many of you are familiar with. This is a project funded by the California Office of Emergency Services that allows CALCASA and JDI to partner in offering support and guidance to California rape crisis centers on building strong relationships with California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, or CDCR, staff, and creating sustainable agreements and protocols for the provision of victim services to survivors inside CDCR facilities. We provide technical training and assistance wherever it is needed. And we're going to be talking about some of what this project has been able to achieve later on. We want to always keep in mind that although much progress has been made, there continue to be gaps and challenges in the services available to survivors behind bars. So briefly, if folks would like to type in the chat box and just introduce themselves, say what agency they're with, and let us know your current role. Good morning. And our agenda today, hello, Sasha. Good morning. Good to have you with us. Hello, RCS Fresno. Hello, Jennifer. Sophia, welcome. Center for Community Solutions, hello. Good to have you. SafeQuest Solano. And Daniel from Weave, one of our guests today. Isabel. Well, it is truly wonderful to have you with us. Really good to have you. Thank you for joining. Mona. All right, well, we'll go through our workshop agenda and folks can kind of continue to type in. It's good practice to type into the box. So if you have a question later, you know where to go and type it. Good morning, Lisa and Jennifer. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. Today's topic is sustainability. So we're going to be dealing first with creating sustainable partnerships with our correctional partners, with input from Sure Helpline, who has had great success in doing that with their 2 CDCR sites. Then we're going to talk with Daniel from Weave about sustainability at the agency level, really kind of best practices for your crisis center to make sure that there's both awareness of the role you have to play for incarcerated survivors and how to kind of keep that going forward, best practices. And then we'll be speaking with Mona Brown about sustainability at the individual level, which is so crucial because what is an organization except a lot of individuals? And if an individual burns out, that really will affect the overall sustainability of services to survivors. And as always, we encourage you to practice self-care during this webinar. You can take a deep breath, step out as you need to, ask any questions, stand up and stretch, do any activity that will help you. I know Juliana had sent along some coloring pages earlier, and those are really fun. And I think that, I know for me, it can actually help me kind of take in information if I'm also doodling or coloring. So please feel free to do that. Thank you. Now moving into the first part of our agenda, sustainable partnerships with corrections. So one of the most important things, as we're going to hear from Kenia, is to figure out how you can actually interact and maintain these good relationships with those who are charged with PREA duties at your local CDCR facilities. And Kenia is going to dive deep into some of Sure Helpline's history with how they've been able to achieve it, but we did want to start with just some overall best practices that I think we should all keep in mind. So we want to make sure that it's understood that it's really helpful to connect with staff above and beyond the PREA compliance manager. Many times it can be, oh, I found the name of the PREA compliance manager, I'm going to try to bury that person with emails, and oh, I'm not hearing from them, so I guess I'm out of luck. What we've seen in practice is that the more departments you can have connection with and be collaborating with at any site, the more your presence at the facility will grow, and the more that they'll come to understand who you are, what you can offer, and actually come to seek you out for help when they need it. We've also learned that keeping in constant contact and doing in-person meetings when possible is a huge help and just best practice. We understand it's not it's not in everyone's capacity to have a weekly or even monthly in-person meeting. But certainly, I think quarterly meetings is something that most agencies could achieve, as well as maybe even a monthly phone meeting. And I think we also want to make sure we're aware of informal opportunities to provide training and technical assistance to our correctional partners. That can take the form of a side conversation in a hallway, or a casual email in which we approach the issue of PREA and making access to your services a reality through a trauma-informed lens, which is sometimes something that is lacking on the corrections side of things. And now we'll go a little bit more into some of the differences just in outlook between the correctional staff and you all as advocates, because you do have separate roles, but one goal. And that goal is safety of those held inside the facility. So from a corrections standpoint, a good day at work is a day without any stories to tell. That they had no surprises. Everything was running and chugging along as they might expect it to. As advocates, we know that you are far more accustomed to dealing with the unexpected and for rolling with whatever the day has to deal out. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. So whereas a corrections official, their role is to investigate reports of sexual abuse, an advocate's role is to support survivors during the investigative process. Corrections' role is to obtain information through interviews. Advocates are to protect confidentiality. Corrections enforce rules to maintain security, whereas advocates provide trauma-informed crisis intervention. And officers prevent emergencies or seek to prevent emergencies by strictly adhering to policy and procedure, whereas advocates handle unexpected crises on a daily basis. So that's just, but as long as everyone is staying very clear about what their role is, these roles and these duties are complementary, and they will add up to a more safe environment inside for those who need it. Juliana?
Thank you, Matthew. So we've talked over and over again about the importance of building these strong partnerships with our corrections, with our staff and our facilities. And we've identified that in order to sustain the work that we're doing, that's a big part of, again, that sustainability plan, right? So one of the things that we like, as the Advancing PREA project, is really creating these SMART goals, right? So SMART goals that are going to help us ensure that as we're moving forward and things are changing within our agencies and within the facility itself, that we keep this constant mind process of implementing successful victim services to survivors in detention, which is the ultimate goal. So this is sort of the way that we see it, and that we encourage you to see it as well. Setting those SMART goals for us starts with being specific, right? Be specific about your objectives in implementing victim services to survivors behind bars. If you have to meet with your management team and identify what services are within your capacity, do so. Do so before you go into the facility and start promoting these services. But also keep in mind that you shouldn't overextend yourself or make promises to survivors and the facility staff that you might not be able to, that you might not have the ability to provide. So if right now your capacity is only responding to letters and crisis calls, then make sure that that's the bulk of all the work that you're doing. Also ensure that they're measurable goals, right? There are several key components of measuring your objectives or your goals when providing services to survivors in detention. One is to identify the length of these services to survivors. A lot of the conversations that we've had with some of our advocates, and even with some of the staff in the facilities, how long are you going to be coming into the facility? How long is the service? What's the appropriate length, right? Well, that's all independent to the capacity of your agency. I know that We also want to keep in mind how we're documenting your data. The California Advancing PREA project developed the progress report template, and it's the report that's helping your agency, keep in mind, is this the report that is helping your agency track the needs of survivors, right? Or track the needs of additional training. Collecting data can also help with keeping, again, those realistic expectations of programming and services. If there's only one advocate that's clear to enter the facility, this tracking or this data collection can help you identify that maybe there's a need for additional staff, or that your capacity needs to be extended a little bit more. So measuring these goals is going to allow you to really plan for the future a little bit more appropriately. Are they achievable goals? As advocates, we often overpromise ourselves. Achievable goals keep us thinking of whether our services are reasonable enough to sustain. There's a constant movement in rape crisis centers as well as in our facilities, and I'm sure that you'll hear that from some of our guest speakers today, that there's constant movement and constant change. So services should mimic the capacity within your community access. For example, forensic accompaniment, several advocates in your rape crisis centers are already doing that. What additional training might they need in order to get ready to support a survivor in detention? That way you don't have just one person who is doing the forensic exams. It's extended as an agency protocol. So make sure that these are achievable goals as well. Are they relevant goals? Are the services and resources relevant to the needs of incarcerated survivors? I know that we say often that it should mimic a lot of what you have available for the community, but specifically when it comes to services and resources, those needs to be more detailed to how they're going to be accessible to survivors in detention. So we need to begin thinking outside the box, right? And understand that not all of the resources that we have are applicable for survivors inside detention. So do your research and have a list of available items that would support your survivors. Also, I know that we've shared with all of you some coping strategies coping strategies that were developed by an inmate at CIW. So those can be a resource for you. They don't have to be the ultimate list of coping skills, but they can be a resource to give them more appropriate coping strategies, or having healing conversations, keeping in mind the unique surrounding of the survivors in detention. And are they time-based goals? Keep your goals within, again, that realistic time frame. Things change constantly in detention. Survivors can be transferred to other facilities. Programming can change based on needs. Things are constantly changing inside all of these facilities. So have realistic expectations of the length of your services so that survivors receive the most during that time. And again, these are just some of our ideas, some of the things that we want to go and share with you all, but they're definitely not the ultimate aspect of goals. So keep those in mind and use those as you're starting to develop your own sustainability of the services that you're providing for survivors in detention. So we can have honest conversations about how challenging this work is, and it continues to be, and it's probably going to be for a very long time. But we also want to acknowledge that as a result of the entire advocacy that you all have been providing and supporting us and kind of giving us all these narratives and conversations, we can say that we have accomplished big milestones in ensuring that survivors have access to victim services from rape crisis centers. We can now say that 32 out of 35 CDCR facilities have operational MOUs with their local rape crisis centers. So thank you very much for all of that. We know that it's not an easy or fast process, but it's amazing to see that out of these 35, 32 can say that these are now available. We can also say now that CDCR has now agreed to facilitate forensic exam accompaniments and reaching out to an advocate, toll-free, non-recorded, non-monitored calls, and confidential written correspondence. I know that most of you do services to jails and juvenile halls and other sorts of detention, and that might not be applicable for those facilities. But with your advocacy, this can also be a goal that you set for those facilities. So we can say that in this big system of CDCR, this is what we have achieved thanks to all of your support. And really, you are all doing the groundwork and keeping these conversations going, and backing up the importance of making sure that this is accessible. Please share in the chat box if some of the challenges that you might have had, or even, if you don't have an MOU, if you're one of those, right? So please feel free to share anything in the chat box with us. We definitely like to hear from you.
Thanks, Juliana. Here are two truths that we know. First, it can be difficult, demoralizing, frustrating, and intimidating to partner with corrections staff and CDCR. Second, there are survivors of sexual abuse and sexual harassment living in CDCR custody who need your help. So now we'll hear from an agency who understands both these truths, but hasn't let any obstacles stop them from providing services.
Thank you. So I, excuse me, would like to introduce SURE Helpline, who is a rape crisis center located in El Centro, California. As an agency, they have displayed true commitment to serving incarcerated survivors at local youth facilities, immigration facilities, county jails, and 2 CDCR facilities in their service area. They have Cali Patria State Prison and Centinela State Prison. So we are really happy to be joined today by Kenia Felix, who is the PREA coordinator, and Brandy Galvan. She's one of their lead advocates, development manager. And SURE Helpline has an amazing team. They have a huge team that always shows up with power. So welcome, SURE Helpline.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Matthew and Juliana, for that great introduction. Thank you.
Of course. So, Kenia, in a little history before we get started with our guest speakers, we had an opportunity to speak with them. So a lot of what we're going to talk is based on those conversations. So Kenia, you mentioned to us in a conversation, again, that we recently had, that you think that advocates need to feel more comfortable in taking the lead in their dealings with corrections. That may surprise some. So as we're entering the system that provides services, can you talk a little bit more why you think taking the lead is important?
Yes, Juliana, thank you. Taking the lead. So those are really, really important legal departments, and they really want to keep their policies and everything with them themselves. So them coming to an agency for help, that's something that is not in their best interest, not because they don't want to provide the help, but because they have so much going on in the facility. For them, it's more that they're so caught up in the work and they don't have the time or knowledge on how to approach these outside agencies, right? So how you present it and how you go to these facilities and provide the assistance and explain the benefit it can have on each individual is something that you, as a rape crisis center, you're looking like for needles in a haystack when you're looking for survivors, especially in those type of settings. It's hard enough that people have the courage to disclose some sort of sexual abuse, sexual violence. You would think that these folks in the facilities are 100% safe, but in reality, we know that there's more than just a wall. It's more than just a cell. As far as sexual abuse and human trafficking, we know that these things are happening in correctional facilities. Correct. And explaining to these folks the main reason and the main purpose you're out there, and that it's for the benefit, for them, and for the other, that you really think, explain to them that you laws are changing and folks are going to come back into the community. if I can put my 2 cents, and I want a healthy, a mental well-being, stable neighbor, so that the recidivism rate reduces, then I'm going to put my 2 cents in it to help that survivor, you know? So it's kind of like, it's really important that you're there offering everything to these facilities so that they can take all that with them. It's much more than just being a correctional officer. It's much more than, you know, preserving the peace in there. It's so much more, because you're going to also provide that to the community once they're released, you know?
So you share that, you know, taking the lead and really going in there and you know, kind of making sure that they know that you're in there to be a resource, right? Can you talk, so we also know that in reality, right, that they might not have, as correctional staff or even as survivors or an inmate really, they might not have the ability to be in a safe space to discuss these things, right? To really have an honest conversation with you about possible sexual abuse that is happening. So can you talk more about how you've seen the work go a bit better because you've given them space and making sure that staff really just sees you as a resource?
Yeah, of course. So part of our policies as a Red Crisis Center of Imperial County, we always stress that every time we come into contact with a person in the community, we explain to that person the services we offer. So every time we're in that facility, when we come across any officer, any correctional officer, if it's people that are doing jobs, if it's the office, the programming office, if it's the people that are doing the live scans, they know what services we offer and what we're there for and what our purpose is. So informing each and every officer you encounter with of the services that you're offering and the purpose is really important, because you know what, if it doesn't get spread by the PREA compliance team in the facility, it's going to be spread word of mouth between officer to officer. And sometimes we've even had officers that tell me, you know what, I didn't even know that I had that service offered in the county. Well, we're here for you, we're here for them, and we're here for the community. And it's strictly, you know, provide that safe zone, that space where they can address all the violence that they have suffered.
Hi everyone, this is Brandy speaking. Pleasure to be here. Just wanted to add that a lot of the times it starts with something simple. So sometimes we'll go in a group of 4 for a support group, and sometimes there's officers maybe there looking at us and they're kind of like, who are these people? So it's just something simple, being friendly and going ahead and introduce ourselves. So we find that a constant thing that happens. They're just probably looking like, okay, they're not with us, so what's going on? But we just take that time to introduce ourselves.
And I think that you both mentioned something really important and something that we've discovered as we've been moving forward with the project, that sometimes your PCM is not the only person that should know about your services, right? That it should be everyone at the facility. So every time you encounter anyone, it may be an intake officer, it may be a transport officer, it might be a chaplain, it might be a therapist, it might just be your community resource representative, right? That you start sharing these resources so that everyone really knows what you're there for and that they're not just kept within the silo of the PCM. So, you know, that sounds super effective, you know, and I know that one of the things that we also have, you know, mentioned in conversations and that you said is that in these conversations, you've also been able to identify, you know, the facility's needs and be able to fill those in, right, as a resource. And you would never be in that position unless you ask those questions and have those conversations.
Yeah. I think it's super important. If they don't respond to a message, if they don't respond to a phone call, you know what? Just show up. Just show up. Nothing's going to happen if you don't show up. They're not going to move. They're not going to go look for you. They're not. So being direct, and something that they really like is that you're straightforward and they don't like beating around the bush or anything like that. They want to know what's going to happen on their ground. So it's really important that you're really focused on the verbiage that you use towards these officers, because I'm not gonna put anybody down or anything, but they're focused on the security portion. So they went through an academy to maintain the safeguard of the communities in a facility. So the knowledge they have on trauma, and a lot of that stuff they don't have. So it's really important that you communicate all that stuff with them, and be one, work hand in hand. Because in reality, we need to find survivors to provide them the appropriate needs, the appropriate help, anything that we can to help them, provide them the tools to heal. But in reality, they need us to comply with their standards. So.
And I think that you said something that is sort of like the next little topic that we have here, that you're using that concise and direct communication style, right? So you're going in there, you're really being honest and putting things on the table and saying, like, this is what I can do, and these are the resources that I can provide you. I'm not coming in here to hold your hand and tell you that you're doing something wrong or that you're not being compliant with anything. I'm just trying to be a resource so that you are compliant, and that's sort of like that help that I can give you. So it's having that direct communication style with them. I know that one of the things that we've also talked, and you've shared with us actually some great stories, is that, there's been times that you've used the PREA standards to help incarcerated survivors at your facility. Can you share a little bit more about that with us?
Yes, I can. So, can you repeat that last thing again?
Of course. So, how do you use the PREA standards to help incarcerated survivors at your facility? I can put it like that.
So, can I share the story of
Yeah, I think that you should. I think that it's a great story, and that it really shows how just having some understanding of the PREA standards was able to help you have a conversation in ensuring that a survivor was given advocacy support when it came to the facility, them thinking that it wasn't something applicable.
Yeah, so part of our policies is to review and have a deep knowledge of what the PREA standards are. And for one of the, we've attended to several cases in the facilities, but this particular case, we were deep in with the PREA work and everything, right? So the PCM called us out. We went to the investigatory interview. And then, the clients decided, you know what, I want in-person counseling service. Like, cool, we'll provide the counseling service, but we need to let the PCM know so that they can coordinate a safe spot so that they don't see or they don't see you, and they don't connect us, and to maintain confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, awesome. So I talked to the PCM. He said, okay, well, let me give you a call back. Oh, I was waiting for that call back. Then he called me back to invite us to one of the LDI trainings they had out here in Limburg County by Captain Shannon Stark. Mm-hmm. So he invited us to that training, right? And I said, yeah, cool. We're the local rape crisis center, and we've been working great. So, hey, on another note, is there did you get me the date so I can go speak to the PREA case? So we can continue with services. And he said, you know what? Unfortunately, the case was unfounded, and for that reason, we can't provide services. Mm-hmm. We can't let you come in to provide services. I said, you know what? Well, okay, that's fine. So that next morning, we went into the facility, and I remember that we presented ourselves, and we went over a couple of the stuff we did with the facilities, and how, we're there for them to use as tools to provide the inmates with the appropriate and services that they're entitled to, and we went on. At one point, I asked, I believe, Ms. Stark, hey, Ms. Stark, so you're the PREA compliance managers from headquarters, right? And she said, yeah, okay, well, I wanted to not address, but I wanted to clarify something. In the PREA standards, it doesn't specify that, or there's not one standard that says that because of the outcome of the investigation, they're not entitled to service. And she said, that's absolutely correct. So, we finished with our presentation, and we're walking out. It happens to be that they were going to have another training the next day, and Captain Sarge said, hey, can you guys come out tomorrow? We're going to have another group. Oh, yeah, we'll be available tomorrow. And then the PCM comes out, and he says, you know what? Can you accompany tomorrow? And can you accompany us tomorrow? And I said, yeah, that's great. Oh, and by the way, you have that, I'm going to call you to schedule that appointment. I said, oh, thank you very much. So he knew that, you know, I was being clear, I was being firm and fair to what they have to follow, not what I have to follow. And he was very, very, very understanding. And he said, okay, well, you know, I said, use it as much as you can, because, you know, we have these services available. Make use of them. They're free.
And I think that, you know, this story brings out so many thoughts, right? And by the way, like, we're very mindful and very, like, realistic about knowing that going into these conversations might take some time, right? That we're not all at the level where we can just be like, let's just be out there and be direct with them and just tell them. It really, it's different, right? It's the personalities in the facility. It's the actual culture in the facility. I mean, Kenia, you've said it before, it's communities in there, right? They know exactly how to speak to you, how to talk to you. You have to learn how to adapt to that as well. So,
exactly.
You know,
be very open-minded and, you know, in a very professional way.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, like, know the facility's needs. We're a rural community, so I can speak to both facilities. These facilities have really limited resources. All their resources are coming from San Diego or other areas. So we kind of took advantage of that need, and we went into the facility with the program manager, and that's how everything started with the programming. And, you know, we offered the local resource to the program manager and said, you know what, because we know that we're the PREA team, the PREA group, the ones that are in charge of all the aftermath of helping these survivors, you know, we knew that the need was there.
Yeah.
So we kind of used that to our benefit and said, you know what, we know things are happening and people aren't reporting. We know that human trafficking exists within these facilities, and they're not reporting. They're not getting out, you know?
Yeah.
Regardless of the time committed, they still are entitled to services. So, you know what, we need to work together to better this community, because these folks are going to be our neighbors. They're going to be your neighbors. They're going to be my neighbors. I really want to contribute to a step in their change. So, and a step in their healing. So we offered programming with topics that people disregard, that people don't talk about because of taboos in society. Mental health is something that people nowadays it's talked about. Before, it's not something, you know, mental health, if you go to a psychiatrist, you're already crazy. So that's what people thought of it, you know. We're here, our community is large number of Hispanics. We have a lot of Hispanic people. So, you know, all the things that how we grew up, how we viewed society, how society viewed us, and, you know, how we can't ask for help because we weren't taught to ask for help, is kind of, it's deep. It's more than just a simple inmate, you know?
Yeah.
So we kind of talked to the program manager and told them all of what we had to offer, and we wanted to talk about stuff, and that we knew that mental health wasn't, although it was a resource in the facility, people weren't going to it because of internal politics. So I told them we need to find a very strategic way that we're going to present it to them. And I can guarantee that people are going to start asking for help, or at least their yards are going to be calmer, because there was a lot of changes within them that they're putting GPs with general population with sensitive needs. So there was a lot of things happening in their yards. They liked what we offered. They provided that to the MAC, and the MAC had to be really strategic on the way they presented it to the inmate population. They knew the facility's needs. They're a group of inmates that is like a little board within themselves. And they knew the things that were happening, and they knew the need, and they knew that they had to put their 2 cents in to assist. So we worked together with program management, with PREA, PCMs, PREA compliance managers at facilities, and we worked with the inmates that knew the needs of the facility.
Yeah, and
so
I think
we came in one.
And I think you said something really great right now that kind of takes us to the next one, where you've continued to be very consistent and persistent and active in trying to ensure that these partnerships are happening, and that it's just not being held by one representative of the facility, right? You just said that it was the MAC, you know, it was the community resource manager, it was your PCM, it was mental health. It was a lot of those representatives of your facility that were being part of the conversations in order to ensure that these services were being promoted, right? Because at the end of the day, I know that we say this a lot, we're going in there and we're promoting these services because due to a lot of the internal politics inside of these facilities, just going in there and putting up a poster might not do it for everyone, right?
Yeah, we need to build a connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So important. And that's why we had to be really strategic about the way we were going to go in there and not say, hey, you guys, we're the rape ladies, we're here to provide services.
Yeah.
But we had to build more of a very professional, but more of a connection with it.
Definitely. And thank you so much, Kenia, for just keeping us and giving us these amazing conversations about how you've just gone in there, all of you really, and really take every opportunity or every time you meet with someone at the facility as a learning opportunity, a training opportunity, really, that's what it is, in order to, you know, promote your services and ensure that this partnership continues, not only with your PCM, but also with other members of the facility. And I actually, just kind of to wrap it up a little bit, really like to show off some of the results of the great approach that SURE Helpline has had in partnering with corrections. So currently, SURE Helpline has Common Grounds Group at Centinela, so that's the title of their group. And I know Kenia was able to share with us a little bit that the reason it was called Common Grounds was because they all wanted to have a safe space in topics of talking, right? So this was all developed with conversations, again, not only with the PCM, but with other members of the facility. SURE Helpline also now has 8 brown card staff, so they have access to the facility. Not that it's an easier access, but a more of a consistent access, just like the staff from Centinela or Calipatra, which is our facilities, would have. They actually have 3 additional staffers who are cleared to enter the facility, just in case for some reason the brown cards are not available. And SURE Helpline has actually presented at the statewide LDI training and at an invitation of a PCM at Centinela, which is part of the story that Kenia shared with us. So all of these successes, again, you know, we hear these successes and this great partnership happening, but we are also mindful that this didn't happen overnight. This took some time. You know, SURE Helpline has 2 CDCR facilities, and one of them is more advanced than the other in the perspective of providing these services. So keep in mind that we're going to hear all these amazing success stories, but it does take time. It does take a lot of patience. Again, going back to what Kenia was saying, you definitely have to be very consistent. You have to be persistent, and you have to stay active in order for these things to happen. So
always remembering and taking into consideration.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, this is Brandy speaking. So part of our success, I think, going in there was the fact that we made sure that all of us were very well aware of the PREA standards. So it's very important going in there, especially in their environment, to know your stuff. Basically, you don't want to be questioning or them questioning you and you not really know. It's good to be well prepared. Another thing that I feel was a really good balance for us was we had to be firm, but we also had to find a balance where they knew that we also respected what they do. It's kind of natural. I mean, all of us in the field that sometimes people are actually threatened by us, and people are actually threatened by advocacy services because they feel like maybe they're going to do something wrong, and we're going to have to call them on it. And that's something that's worked upon as it goes. Of course, you guys all know that, but that's something to keep in mind, that you might be a threat to them, and it's just keeping that in mind while you're talking to them, because you can be firm, but also letting them know that you're aware of the services they have to provide and respecting what they have to do. It's just finding that balance, and they end up respecting you a lot more because they know that you're not a threat to them. In reality, they know that you're there to provide the services and work together. So just wanted to bring up, I know for our personal experience, something that was brought up in conversations and that we knew that officers were talking about was that if we were aware of possible inmate manipulation. That was just one example. And we told them that we do have our own trainings here and we do have to do a lot of research. So at the end of the day, we will tell them just because someone's an inmate doesn't mean that they're gonna they have to get raped when they're in there. Reality is that that's not part of the conviction, but we are aware of the situations that can be at hand. So that's also making them feel comfortable, the fact that you're well prepared again.
Yeah, I think that was important, and thank you for sharing that, Brandy. That, you know, again, it's kind of going back to even what Matthew was talking earlier in the webinar, that you know, there's two different roles, right? And that the goal is really to ensure that the facilities are safe. And, you know, your safety is not going to look the same way as the definition of safety for them, but at the end of the day, it's the safety of your survivor, right? And the safety of those who might be more prone to be victimized, you know, for sexual abuse. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Share Helpline, for the amazing work that you're doing. And we really are very lucky to been able to speak with you again.
So much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Guys, use your audits to your benefit, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kenia and Brandy. And now we'll turn to how to focus on maintaining sustainability at the agency level. And let's keep in mind as we enter this discussion, what is actually in our control? What can we do without any kind of buy-in from our correctional peers? What can we do ourselves without waiting for any kind of participation or help? One thing we can do is make our own communications plan and stick to it. That can be like a weekly or bi-weekly reminder to reach out to your facilities with an update. It can also look like making sure you document such outreach attempts and change up your tactics when necessary. We are going to be, we heard from Kenia and Brandy that persistence and consistency and staying active are extremely important when it comes to informing your approach to CDCR. And also, to keep abuse in detention as a living topic at your agency, maybe making it a recurring or standing agenda item on your internal all-staff meetings. So as we look to begin this conversation about agency sustainability, some other kind of broad basics to keep in mind, big questions, such as who at your agency is going to be working with incarcerated survivors, making sure that your intake forms are appropriate for clients who are incarcerated. Do they have a space for a booking number, for example? And then also identifying the obstacles that might exist to accessibility for folks who are incarcerated. Can they actually, you might have an MOU, but is it worth anything? Can they actually get the access that they need when they need it? Are they given the information on how to contact you? So those are just some big, broad things to keep in mind. Now we're going to be speaking with Daniel from WEAVE. And WEAVE is a rape crisis agency in Sacramento, California. It serves Folsom State Prison and the California State Prison at Sacramento. And the past year for WEAVE has seen a complete turnover in their staff who respond to requests for emotional support from inside these facilities. However, I'm very glad to say there has been no drop-off in services to those who need them, and the partnership between WEAVE and the PREA staff at these facilities has not been weakened or needed to be started again from scratch, which is pretty amazing. So we're joined now by Daniel Milewski. Daniel's a PREA advocate at WEAVE who is here to speak about how they've been able to sustain its services and its commitment during and after their staffing transition. Daniel, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing at WEAVE before you took on this PREA role, Daniel?
Yeah, so the way we generally do things here is we have people volunteer before we actually hire them on as staff. So I was a volunteer for a few months, and then I was a crisis response advocate. And in my role as a crisis response advocate, I was being dispatched to start exams. I was answering our support and information line, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess immediately before you kind of became, the key person for this work inside facilities, what did you have a period of kind of being trained up by? I know that Jenica had been working inside the facility prior. Had you been trained up by Jenica?
Yeah, definitely. I was actually trained about 3 months for about 3 months before I got into the position, before it became available. I was trained to be her backup. One of the things we really believe in is not leaving survivors without any sort of support, and just in case Jenica burnt out or something happened and she had to leave town, we wanted to have a backup in place to continue providing those services.
I think that's a really important word to kind of hear, backup. I think that many times we hear from folks who are the sole person who they are the kind of tip of the spear going into facilities. They hold all the information about where the conversation stands, about the MOU, or whether the posters are up, or what their brown card status is. They're the only person who knows. And I think that indicates kind of a lack of keeping an eye on sustainability. So I'm really just so impressed by Weave's, the way you came into this role full on was by being trained to be the backup person, so that there would continue to be that consistency of services if Jenica was not able to do that. So it sounds like maybe when you started that training, you weren't necessarily expecting to be the person, but the fact that you were being trained has really helped you kind of thrive in that position.
Yeah, most definitely. I kind of hit the ground running. I was already trained. Mm-hmm. It just made transitioning so much easier.
And I'm assuming, are you training now someone to be backup for you in the event that you're away for any reason?
I am, most definitely.
Great. And when Jenica kind of did provide that training for you, I want to know, was it more of a, this is what PREA is? Was it a PREA 101, or was it more nuts and bolts about what you're actually going to do from your desk and communicating with your CDCR colleagues?
So our PREA 101 is kind of a general introduction when we train our volunteers. So I had already had that. It was more.
Oh, wow.
It was more like when we sat down, it was more how we wanted to expand services, the services we were offering. And then Jenica went over in depth successes and challenges, kind of to prepare me for what I would be facing. Sometimes when you don't get responses from your PCM or staff, it's really, I don't want to say the word depressing, but it's definitely a letdown. So to be prepared for those types of situations is helpful.
Yeah, that sounds like that was really a good practice, where she really kind of told you a little bit of a history with Weave and its facilities, and then just some of the practical things that she was doing to kind of overcome those challenges. So that seems like it was something you really benefited from in the training from your predecessor. And are there any other practices at Weave which helped to ensure that survivors at Folsom and CSPSAC would continue to receive services despite the staff turnover?
Yeah. During the transition, Jenica actually introduced both Marcy and myself. Marcy is our violence response team manager. That's the department I fall in here under the umbrella of response services. Mm-hmm. And then after Jenica kind of gave us that warm handoff, I followed up with, it's a second email. Reintroducing myself. Mm-hmm. It was really nice to have that introduction.
I think so. And I think also that this harkens back a little bit to, what Kenia had been talking about, where you want to stay persistent and consistent. I think that sometimes when we see staff turnover at RCCs, your correctional colleagues will be like, oh, well, I don't know who this person is. I don't know that they know the lay of the land. And it's a little bit of a starting from zero. But it seems that what we've did was have Jenica do that, as you said, warm handoff. And folks were able to kind of associate you, Daniel, with Jenica and weave and be like, oh, okay, this is something we're comfortable with. We're not starting from scratch. So it seems like a really simple thing, but it was really, really positive. Are there any other things you'd like to kind of highlight that we've uses as a best practice for sustainability, or tools that you have available?
Yeah, we have a couple of different things. We have an internal Google Drive where everything, each department has their own folders, and all our information is in there. Like, you know, I was able to look at templates for letters to inmates. I was just all our policies and procedures, links to the PRC. So I was able to peruse that before I sat down and had my training. So we were able to focus on exactly what was going down, you know, exactly what I would be doing. It includes resources and learning materials about working with incarcerated survivors, you know, even, sorry.
No, fine.
Those files really helped me, you know, because they helped me get an idea of what I would be doing so I could ask more focused questions of her experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, we also have a referral book, which is another digital resource that we have that is available, or that is what all our support line advocates use. And that also has internal procedures and protocols for the entire response services department. Anyone at Weave can access that, you know.
That sounds terrific. It sounds like that's a really great kind of best practice, you know, keeping that almost like a little standing library where folks can educate themselves. And that could be used by folks who are working directly with incarcerated survivors at Weave or not, just to learn more about that aspect of Weave's work.
Yeah.
So it seems like the overall approach is that even though there are different departments and different specialties at Weave, there's kind of this idea of keeping everything under one umbrella. How do you do that? I mean, what does that look like in practice? Making sure that there is that kind of those intersecting lines and that cross-department, cross-specialty dialogue.
Yeah, that's one of the points is not to keep detention work in a bubble. And all too often organizations have their own departments and own specialties, but things fall through when these departments don't keep in contact. So we all meet regularly and we all give updates. So we're all aware of what other programs are doing, you know, people's availability to learn things like shadowing and to be a backup, you know.
Yeah.
And everyone at Weave knows everything we have to offer, just because so many different things are intersectional. You never know if your trafficking client also knows a survivor that's incarcerated, you know. So we, like the previous presenter was saying, you know, like knowing all your services all the time and letting everyone know about them is super, super important to this work.
Yeah, I think you've given us a lot of great kind of best practices. And just so everyone can see, what Daniel was describing was that you identify who's going to be doing the work, and then you train staff members to provide that backup. You allow departing staff to train their replacements. You have departing staff introduce new staff to CDCR partners, and you maintain those informational resources such as Weave's Google Drive, and never keeping that work kind of under glass in a bubble with detention settings, that there is that ongoing dialogue. It's a topic of conversation at the agency. So as a result of those practices, we've really seen a lot of successes, things that we can point to. So Daniel, what can you kind of point to as a sign that the relationship between WEAVE and CDCR is strong, and that survivors inside CDCR are now more likely to receive help because of the work you're doing and the groundwork WEAVE has laid out for sustainability? Anything you can point to?
Yeah, I kind of like to joke that now I'm actually getting responses to my emails. Similarly, we schedule this. We're scheduling a tour for Folsom, and even though I haven't officially got my brown card yet, we had a referral come in, and I was given access to provide services to that client. And one thing that's really important about that specific case is we actually have the PCM referring us to other departments that can help us, to schedule my intake with that client. I actually went through the legal department. I didn't get in during normal visiting hours. We get in during the legal visit times. So the visiting area isn't full of a bunch of other inmates and people, just so the client feels safer.
That sounds like a huge difference, and something that will really make it a more productive and positive, visit with that client.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know you had mentioned previously that you were trying to get in touch with the Men's Advisory Council.
Yeah, the positions had changed, so my initial emails weren't going through. And then finally, when I got a response from the PCM, I was informed that, the positions had changed and got a new contact number. And the MAC supervisor is actually who's scheduling our tour now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. And overall, I think you see, I think this is, your whole way of speaking about this work. I think it demonstrates that you have a very strong feeling of confidence when it comes to serving incarcerated survivors, that you will be able to kind of pass on to the person that you're training now. Do you think that's right?
Oh, definitely. So this is, I've had a lot of family members that have been incarcerated, so this work is really, really close to my heart.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Daniel. And I think just this conversation, I think, has given us a lot of best practices and just kind of a very, very thoughtful way of approaching this work to achieve agency sustainability. Is there anything that we haven't touched on, Daniel, that you think would be worthwhile to share before we close with this topic?
If something isn't working, one of the things that we do is put out an email to the entire team, even if they're not familiar with PREA work, just because so many different people have so many different perspectives. I think close collaboration with all the departments within your organization is something I can't stress enough,
That sounds like a big takeaway, just the idea that this does need to be a topic that extends to all departments inside your agency, even those who are not going to be doing the work directly, but you can, because there is that connectedness, and there does need to be kind of a unified agency approach for the benefit of survivors, both outside and inside detention.
Yes.
So we want to thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us this morning, and please keep doing what you're doing, and we'll stay in touch about successes that you have as we go forward.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now we'll turn on to discussing sustainability at the individual level. Maybe Juliana's audio is acting up.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, there we are.
I had myself on mute and didn't realize it.
Okay.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Matthew, and thank you for Daniel for really giving us that perspective of the internal agency and the sustainability that you've been able to keep as you have transitioned from, from two amazing advocates who did the work for a very long time. A little back history on WEEF is that Jenica and Tabitha were our primary PREA advocates for a very long time, I think from the beginning of the project in year one. And within the last couple of months, things have shifted, right? We talk about change. So things shifted a little bit, and Daniel and Marcy joined the team. And we were honestly, as we always are, always very a little nervous, right, about how things are going to change and how things might not be moving forward. But we have seen that, WEEF has done an amazing job in ensuring that those changes don't impact any services and that they continue to grow and they continue to be more successful as well. So we thank WEEF for all the work that they're doing. And now let's talk a little bit more of that individual aspect of it, right? So we know that as advocates, we do an amazing job in encouraging each other, encourage others, really, your survivors, your colleagues, family members, friends, etc., to take care of themselves. But when it really comes down to taking care of our own well-being, we do not prioritize that. We also know that this job can be very isolating, especially when you work, when your work is focused on serving a specific population like survivors in detention. So let's talk about how Women's Center High Desert has actually done an amazing job in practicing self-care at the individual level. So I would like to introduce Mona. So let me read a little bit more about Women's Center High Desert so that you guys know them or get to know them. So Women's Center High Desert is a rape crisis center in Ridgecrest, California, who serves California City Correctional Facility and the California Correctional Institute. As an agency, Women's Center High Desert has a long history of working with incarcerated survivors. And over the past 3 years, the torch has been carried primarily by Mona Brown, a victim advocate. And Mona's dedication to serve an incarcerated survivor is inspiring to all of us. And she joins us now to discuss not only the ways in which she brought emotional support to her CDCR facilities, but also the ways that she's learned to incorporate self-care into her own personal practice, ensuring her light can continue to shine brightly. So thank you, Mona, for joining us today. See, maybe her sound is off. Mona, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
So
Thank
Mona,
you for having me.
of course, thank you for being here with us. Mona, one of the things that you stated with, you shared with us in a conversation that we had last year during our Peer Leader Summit was that you told us how important it was for you to feel like you were making a difference, right? And prior to diving into full throttle to work at California City Correctional Facility and California Correctional Institute, you were also working at the county level at Lerdo Correctional Facility. Can you share a little bit with us what has driven you really to do what you do and to be at a place that you are now?
Oh, sure. Starting at Lerdo, and I was there for almost 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the beginning just me being gung-ho and wanting to help everyone. And obviously, I think everyone can attest to this, that when you're a newbie, you're going to go and change the world. So I was on a path at Lerdo and quickly started seeing, at least within the year mark, started seeing, this was a little bit harder than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, so it took some time to really recognize, right, that you had hit that wall and that you were maybe overextending yourself, right? And that you had to really identify those limits, right, before you reach them. So can you share a little bit more about that journey and how that happened?
Sure. Well, the reporting the PREA incidents at the county level, the process is a little bit different than the state level. And both are difficult, but for me, the county level started taking the wind out of me, dealing with one of my clients. And I had already started thinking maybe I should move on, especially when you guys approached me about working in the state level. But I did have a client that had reported an incident on the county level, and it felt so draining. I really didn't know how to handle it. And I had to ask myself, was this where I wanted to be? And where were my limits? And I actually really did identify my limits. So I wanted to be healthy, to be able to start at the state level. So I knew I had to move on. And I did. I went to my bosses and I told them, I'm going to have to let go of the county level, especially since we're moving into CDCR. I don't want to be overtaken by everything that's going on.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, what you're sharing is really valuable, right? That it's okay to give yourself permission to make these changes. It's okay to understand that there gets a point where, you know, you want to continue supporting survivors and that you don't want to be feeling like how you're feeling or your awareness might affect the survivor or your client, right? Making sure that you don't become their client, right? That they're not the ones supporting you. So can you share a little bit more of what happened to make you really realize, and I know you shared a little bit, but can you share a little bit more about what made you realize you needed to take advantage of maybe the resources that you had, which was speaking to your management, right? Or understanding that some of the resources available for others were also available for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I believe that this career is a part of my purpose. And so if you're not using self-discipline and boundaries when you're going through emotional ups and downs, you're going to crash. And so obviously you don't want your clients to see that. So self-care is the answer. And just like you just said, you don't want your clients trying to take care of you. So I'm not trying to be stoic. I want to come in with empathy and compassion for what they're about to tell me, but I got to let go of what's going on at home or what stresses that are going on in my life in the office. So you have to take account and use self-discipline in everything you do.
And I think that a lot of folks listening can probably identify with what you're saying, right? And also with how difficult it is to really slow down and take time for yourself, right? And you said that you know, you had to really identify what you needed to do in order to take care of yourself. So how do you keep yourself centered and feeling a little bit, feeling balanced, really?
Well, it sometimes it's hard, and I actually have a second job on the weekends that I also work in customer service. So I'm an early riser, and I take advantage of that. I start out in the morning meditating, really tuning into my own strength, understanding and letting myself know that there are going to be good moments and hard, difficult moments, but I always take time in the morning and just quiet myself. Being accountable for me, is the key. And we also have a new resident therapist on our staff, Yolanda Larios, and she is excellent. So my tribe here, they tell me, check in with Yolanda once a week, just vent or whatever else you need to do, but check in with her and give her some understanding of what you're going through so she can help you. And it's helped me a lot, and I do it weekly.
Great. And when I know that we you know, we all have that moment where we get to the realization of like, I wish somebody would have told me this my first day or when I first started this. What would you have liked someone to say to you as you were starting this journey? Because, with the work that we're doing with survivors in detention settings, we constantly say that we are on a journey, that there's no straight pathway, right? That it's a journey and it's going to have a lot of curves and turns, but we're on it. So what would you like someone to say to you as you're beginning your journey?
Well, definitely dealing with the community as a whole, but me going inside, working with inmates, and I don't even call them inmates, I call them my clients, because they are my clients. Either you're going to burn out or you're going to be more aware. And so I think that's what I started doing at the county level, really slowly burning out. And because I'm such a procrastinator, I didn't let it go. So it really did take a toll. But now, because I do understand self-care and I understand the discipline that it takes to continue on the path of self-care, I'm very aware of my limitations. I'm very aware of when I'm hitting a mark or doing something that is actually elevating the process or taking away from it. So I take account, like I said. It's always about taking account of where you are right at that moment.
Right. And I think that that's very powerful. And I hope that everyone who's joining us today has an opportunity to really sit down and identify where they are, right? To really have that self-awareness of where you are when it comes, maybe not even specifically to the work that you're doing in detention, but to all the work that you're doing in your agency. We, just like Mona shared, right? We all carry many different hats, right? And it's always good to take that time and really identify, again, where you are and how you're really going to move forward in that journey so that you can ensure that you are taking care of yourself and that you are providing the best support to your clients.
I also want to stress that it's so important to pat yourself on the back.
Yes.
Small successes, because when you come against all of the challenges in this work, they're going to seem like mountains if you don't recognize that you've actually came a long way, even with the small things that you do.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Mona. I think that you're absolutely right. That we sometimes look more at the challenges and the successes that we've had, right? Because sometimes those challenges carry a bigger impact or a bigger weight, right? But everyone who's, joining us today have accomplished something, right? Like, just like we said earlier today of some of the accomplishments of the project, right? Up to a couple of years ago, survivors didn't have access to free confidential calls, right? Up to a couple months ago, actually, they didn't have access to that. That's a huge success, and that's happened because of all the successes that you all have been able to contribute to the project. So you're absolutely right, and thank you for sharing that, Mona. And talking a little bit more about successes, we always like to brag about all of you when we talk to each other. Here are some of the successes that Women's Center High Desert has seen. And again, these don't happen overnight, right, Mona? You've been part of the journey. These have not happened overnight. These have happened throughout a couple of, conversations and going back and meeting and things were not just like, let me implement this and it's going to happen. It's actually been a lot of work. One of the things that have happened is that CCI and CAC issues ducats for incarcerated survivors to attend groups. So Mona is part of that. And Mona, I know that you shared with us yesterday, I think it was actually, that now you have a direct contact with the community response manager, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'm able to email her clients I'm going to see, and she gives them ducats, and they have times to show up, and they're all waiting when I get there.
Yeah, and I know that we see that question of what is a ducat. So Mona, do you want to share with everyone what a ducat is?
Yeah, a ducat is like a hall pass. It gets a person out of their area, their cell, or whatever other appointments they have, and 2-hour appointments
Mhm.
to show up for group and to one-on-ones.
So the big success also with that is that we understand that coming from the rape crisis perspective, right? And going in there and implementing these groups, now Mona has been able to have this relationship with the community response manager, or CRM, at her facility, and they're the ones that are coordinating this, right? So now, again, remember when we say that maybe your PCM is not that person, here's a really good example of how that happened and how that transitioned, where now Mona as an advocate has a direct contact in letting this CRM be able to have the list of the inmates who are going to attend her group, and she has that control. So now it becomes that internal aspect, and the program now becomes more sustainable because it's not depending on whether someone else is available. It's part of the programming.
I think it's imperative to your success to
Mhm.
find out who does what, especially if you're going to need them.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And just kind of going based on what we're talking about, one of the other successes that Women's Center High Desert has been able to implement, and again, this has taken time, it's not something that happened overnight, is that those survivors who attend the groups received attendance chronos for participating in these groups. Now, one of the things that I know Mona wanted to kind of put out there and clarify is that attendance chronos do not take off time from their sentence, but they can be used as these positive completion programs for those who are going into parole, right? And I know that, Mona, you shared with us in the past that one of your previous clients actually was able to utilize that. It was really a big help for him in order to go into parole, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's sorry, Mona, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if you wanted me to elaborate, but
You can. I mean, it's a great story, so you can really share it if you like to.
Well, yeah, and I'll do it quickly. He was going in front of the board. He actually was incarcerated because of domestic violence. And so, and just to go back a little bit, to start my group, we all came up with the idea of adding domestic violence and child abuse to the poster in order to draw people in, because obviously we know that's a big part of sexual assault anyway. And it worked. And he is one of the people that came in that had been dealing with domestic violence, not only being a perpetrator, but also seeing it as a child. And so when he went in front of the board, they mentioned that you haven't had any classes or any type of training in understanding how volatile domestic violence is. And he pulled out my chronos and said, yes, I have. Not only have I been to group, I've been seeing this counselor now for a year. So yeah, after that, he was released. So I was really
awesome
excited to hear that.
Yeah, I remember when you called us and shared that. That was pretty awesome. And again, these things don't happen overnight, right? These take time. Another thing that, Women's Center High Desert has seen is that there has been an increase of buying among CAC and CCI staff. We were able to identify at the beginning that a lot of the staff at CCI, correct me if I'm wrong, not CCI is not Tehachapi, right, Mona?
CCI is Tehachapi, yeah.
Okay. So CAC then, that they had a really good relationship, the staff did, right? With Women's Center High Desert, but when it came to programming, it was a little bit more difficult. Where at CCI, it was the opposite. But now it seems to be balanced, where everyone seems to be on the same page, and it's going back to these conversations, right, and ensuring that things are happening. Another thing that we were able to identify as success for Women's Center High Desert is that word of mouth inside the facilities, right, is that the Women's Center High Desert has the resource of Hopeful Healing. Again, it travels fast, right? So, once you ensure that the MAC and that your inmates know that you're providing a program that they feel safe, in a space that they feel safe, then they're going to show up, which, again, at CAC now has created a wait list of, Mona gave me the number, it was a wait list of 203 possible participants that she has now for her group. And it's because of that word of mouth, because of building that relationship with the inmate population and with the staff, and identifying really those needs in there, and Mona taking care of herself in order to be able to provide these services. Because again, I know Matthew shared at the beginning things that we can and things that we can't control. Having a wait list of 200 plus inmates, right, can put you in a position where you're just like, I'm not doing enough. But taking that time to taking care of yourself is also important. So, and
we know that wait list you'll get through it. We know that we understand that it doesn't mean that those are 200 people who will never be served, but it's that there is demand.
I am going to conquer it.
Yeah.
Yes, you will. Well, thank you so much, Mona, for joining us and for sharing your story with us. We really do appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, Mona.
I really appreciate being here.
Yes. So just kind of quickly as we're wrapping it up here, we also wanted to put a slide here, and it's really just to remind you to develop these self-care key points, to take care of yourself. So one of the things that we encourage you to do is to develop your own self-care plan, right? Mona shared the way that she's been doing it, but that might not look the same for you. So you go ahead and implement this to the way that it's going to be more appropriate within your capacity as well. One of the things that Mona also shared was that she checks in with her management, right? So check in with your agency. Daniel shared that they all know what they are each doing. So check in with people, right? Sometimes it creates these amazing conversations. So that also can help you in taking care of yourself. And I know, as an advocate myself and doing it for many years, one of the hardest things to do is to get support, right? It's really going out there and asking someone for help. But one of the things that I've also learned now that I've been doing this project is that if I don't ask for the support, then it's not really going to get me anywhere, right? So ask for that support. Get yourself in a position where you feel comfortable in asking for it, and, ask those who you feel comfortable with as well. And we're hoping that a lot of these things are things that you already are practicing. And if you're not, we definitely encourage you to do so. We also know that it takes time, right? Again, we're going to say it over and over again. This is all a journey. It's not a set destination.
That's true. And to bring it back to the survivors, the folks that need your help, we want to hear from we understand that the work of advocacy inside detention facilities is very difficult. We also want to highlight that work is so life-changing and like a lifeline for the survivors that you will work with. As Frank, who is a member of JDI's Survivor Council and a survivor of prisoner rape, puts it, if I had had an advocate, it would have saved me so much grief. It would have helped me through that traumatic event immensely. Going through it alone, I didn't know who I could trust and who I could talk to about it, which appeared to be nobody. But we know that Frank does have, and people like Frank do have support, such as yourselves. We want to introduce a resource that was developed by one of your peer agencies, the Coalition for Family Harmony. They have created and allowed us to talk about today an internal protocol for their work that they do with the Ventura Youth Correctional Facility. This is a pretty comprehensive protocol, and it's been approved by them that we can talk about it, and you can use it as a template for your own agency's protocol if you haven't developed one yet. Juliana will be including a link to view it with as part of the follow-up for this webinar. What some of the things they include in that protocol are an overview of PREA, the location and demographics of the facility, the requirements of the facility for clearance, as well as a checklist for an end-of-service conversation and a sample consent form. So it's a really, really great tool. And as always, there are answers to lots of questions you might have at JDI and CALCASA's website and the PREA Resource Center.
So we definitely want to be mindful of your time. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. if there's any other thoughts that come up to mind after we finalize the webinar, please feel free to email them to us as well. But I'm going to give us a couple of seconds to see if there's any questions, any thoughts that might have been triggered as we kind of wrap things up a little bit on the sustainability webinar. And it's okay if you don't have any of those questions right now. I know that that a lot of these conversations have probably triggered a lot of thoughts, and that you are going to likely go back and start processing those things, and that's what we hope that this webinar accomplishes. So you can always reach out to all of us through our individual emails, or where the entire team responds to advocate@justattention.org or PREA@calcasa.org. Those are great resources. Those are great links to provide, to send us questions if need to. Again, if not, you can just send them individually to us.
Yeah, and we would love to hear feedback on this training. We'll be emailing a link to a brief survey, which I'll also share now in the chat box. We'd be grateful if you'd take the time to complete this short survey. I think it's got 11 questions, letting us know how we can improve and what we did right. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much, and we look forward to seeing some of you soon. And please reach out if you have any questions at any time. We are always here to support you. If we don't have the answer, we'll look for it. But we really do thank you for year 4 of Advancing PREA, and for all that you have done and all of the amazing movement that you've contributed in ensuring that survivors inside detention facilities receive your services and have an advocate present when they need it. So thank you so much. We look forward again to hearing from you all, and have a great week.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.